I was hanging out at the ashram I've been spending time at the other day, and I've been hanging out here for parts of the day, pretty much every day for like a month, and I've had very few conversations. I noticed myself feeling available for the potential of a resonant conversation, but sensing that I'm not going to feel that interested in a lot of the conversations, just kind of based on what I'm overhearing. But this day it was crowded, and and I was at a table with some other people, and a couple of them were basically like debating something, sharing their perspectives on something that were different, and I felt myself getting uncomfortable. Like there's something about those kinds of conversations that don't feel interesting to me anymore, and I actually feel a bit uncomfortable in the presence of it. And I noticed myself chime in, and I was like, well, really, you can both be. It can be true what both of you are saying. I was trying to sort of bridge the gap and suggest that there was no right or wrong, that both their perspectives were valid. But I realized in doing that, I was doing the same thing they were doing. I noticed my hypocrisy in trying to get them to see things my way. In that moment, my, you know, innocent desire to, I don't know, smooth the situation, to create less conflict, was simply just stepping in a sense, invalidating both of them. In my witnessing of seeming that they were invalidating each other and trying to validate both of them, in a sense, I was also invalidating both of them. But the hypocrisy was more that I felt them trying to convince each other of something, and then I felt myself stepping in and trying to convince them of something else. And then I got quiet, and then I was like, I don't even want to be a part of the conversation. And they both didn't seem to receive it in a particularly favorable way. They both got kind of quiet, and there was like, I could feel a little defensiveness, and I was like, yeah, I don't really find myself in conversations like that very often. And I think part of why I'm drawn to the virtual realm is those aren't the kinds of conversations I notice myself having very often. I just don't engage in that kind of thing. So, for the most part. So it's interesting to, because even at a place that's, supposedly like spiritual and all that, there's so many, I just sense so much like seeking of validation, which I know I do too. And I'm judging myself through judging people doing that. But in addition to there being a judgment there, there's also seems to be a discernment that those aren't the kinds of conversations I like to have, and that feels like what most of the world the conversation is having. So I find myself not really drawn to communicate with people much outside of the resonant connections that exist for me, which are largely virtually. It feels like there's a part of me that thinks it's arrogant or cocky, but it feels like I'm seeing things that people aren't seeing, in the ways that they're being hypocritical and contradicting themselves and doing the same thing that they're trying to point out there or in another. And a lot of people aren't open to hearing that. And I question, what's my impulse to like point that out to people, right? That's the same thing. That's the same energy. So I wonder if it's a common experience for people to just get quieter and quieter over time as these hypocrisies and paradoxes reveal themselves. I notice myself doing a lot more listening, um, in contexts where it feels like there's that sort of um, confrontational way of being, or righteous, just like wanting to be right about something. I just, there's no, if I sense there's not a lot of room for my perspective to be considered or received, then I don't want to place it there. It kind of feels like self-loving, or like a boundary to say I'm not going to express myself in containers um, where it's not going to be received. I don't even know if it's a boundary. It's more just like an attunement. Like, what's the point? As always, everything I'm sharing could be total bullshit. Can like assume that disclaimer on everything I say. It's all bullshit. It's all just resonance, right? We feel a connection to it or we don't. Hmm. It's interesting that thoughts popping up for me today. I made another video earlier that I haven't shared, that I don't know if I'm going to share it because it feels like everything's so jumbled for some reason. Maybe an invitation to just sort of drop into stillness. Yeah, that kind of feels accurate, actually. I don't know if I'll share this one either. I'll watch it back to myself and see if it feels alive. But sometimes I think the sharing's just for me. It's just a process of um, exploration and maybe an aspect of venting. Something can be revealed to me in this space of watching myself on camera. I show up in a different way on camera, so it's a different me I get to experience, and once in a while it just doesn't feel relevant for other people to experience it. So we'll see. I could be just talking to myself. Maybe that's all we're ever doing. There's only one of us here.